If it's happening in your country or around the world, Power 98.7 is your eyes and ears. Now we're talking.
Indeed, we are talking about something that is happening here at home and around the world. We actually do find ourselves living in interesting times. I believe there is actually a Chinese, it's a curse that says, may you live in interesting times. So it's actually not a good thing. And we certainly are living in interesting times. The world, as we know it, particularly when it comes to geopolitics and international relations, have been flipped on its head following the arrival in the White House of Donald J. Trump for a second term. He has gone about reordering the world, really, in his image. And it doesn't stop. On every single day, you wonder about what's going to happen next. South Africa has most certainly not been spared, as we all watched last week at around more or less this time last week. The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, was in the Oval Office in the White House, where he was the recipient of a classic Donald Trump ambush. Well, through all of this, South Africa has not been alone. They've received widespread support and also backing the defense of the president of the country. And one such country that has certainly stood by South Africa, not only now, but in the past as well, is Sweden. The Embassy of Sweden have expressed dismay at recent events involving the U.S. President Donald J. Trump and his unfounded and misleading remarks about South Africa, as well as the undiplomatic ambush, as they described it, of President Cyril Ramaphosa during his visit to the White House. Sweden's ambassador to South Africa has publicly and unequivocally criticized President Trump's behavior and false claims, reiterating Sweden's long-standing respect for South Africa's democratic institutions, human rights commitments, and efforts to build an inclusive society. Well, His Excellency Ambassador Hakan Juholt joins me in studio this evening. Good evening, Excellency.
Good evening.
And did I pronounce that? I know Swedish names.
I can tell you pronounce my name so much more better than most Swedes do. So we are just six people in the whole country with that name. And no one can pronounce it, and you did it so much better, TG. So
your first name?
That's correct. No, the second name, the given name.
Juholt.
Yeah, Juholt, the surname. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a Swedish? Is that a?
No,
so it's not an eight. It's an eight. It's not a typical Swedish name.
No. My mother.
It's not Eriksson.
No, that's correct. Not Eriksson. My mother and father came up with that in the 50s. They wanted that name, so they made a name by themselves.
They came up with their own family name,
and then wrote a letter to the king, because you have to ask the king for permission. Or the government was, of course, it was not the king himself, but and said, "Can we use this name?" And the answer was, "Yes, you can use that name. Thank you."
And why the choice of this name? What is special about the name? What does it mean?
I asked my mother so many times, and she told me that's the only name we could come up with that doesn't mean anything. And if it doesn't mean anything, then it must be the story of us. Because if the name means anything, that you are the son of that or daughter of that, or is a branch of the tree or house or whatever, then that's the story of the name. But the story of our name are us. We who are carrying the name, nothing else.
So you decide, you give meaning to the name.
We give in every generation, my parents' generation, my generation, and my children's generation, and my grandchildren's generation. We are the one that give meaning to the name. That was their idea in the 50s, and I like the idea.
So the rest of Sweden, do they take on the name of the father? I'm assuming
that's quite
the husband.
Quite common. So many Sven's son, Eric's son. Lars' son. It's quite common that you have that kind of name.
So what was your original family name?
It was Carl's son, the son of Carl.
Yeah. And you dropped... Okay,
they dropped that. They didn't like it.
It's very interesting.
It is.
Very interesting story. Well, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And just to start a conversation, I suppose a good point would be, let me just get a sense of, as a diplomat, how... you of many years, I need to add, how you have stood by and watched, how you've made sense of what is currently unfolding. One would think that we've already been through one Trump presidency, so that we would be kind of prepared for anything, because the first term should have kind of given us a taste of what Donald Trump is about. But I don't think that we have seen anything like this.
No, and the words that you were quoting were my own words on social media, and I did several TV interviews and radio interviews and interviews in news media in Sweden on the ambush that actually took place in the White House with President Ramaphosa. I think that we must look into each other's eyes and tell each other that politics must be about values and to act decent and to be respectful to each other. Well, you and I, we might not agree, but we must respect each other. We must be decent in our conversation. And I cannot accept when you are disrespectful to someone that you don't like. And politics cannot just be private opinions. Politics must be rooted in values, in the country, in parliament, in government, not just something that you say during a press conference. So I would like to be an ambassador for decency and to be respectful and also to be honest in conversation with others. That's what I'm 62 years old now, and that's my advice to the next generation of diplomats and politicians. Please, next generation will ask you to be decent and behave when you talk. And if you talk with someone that you don't agree with, be respectful. We want that.
So that would be the advice that you gave is just about common decency.
Common decency. How hard can it be?
Yeah. So it's not even about diplomacy,
No.
which generally operates within a rules-based environment.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are expected.
Yeah.
But here we are dealing with an administration and a president who's got scant respect for convention, shall we say. So basically, all the rules are out the window when it comes to him.
Well, that's the whole idea behind authoritarian leaders, because they determine what's right or wrong, who should be in, who should be out. And that's why he so many authoritarian leaders all over the world. They find each other. That's why he called Trump his best friend, because there is no democracy in Russia. And now he's disappointed. He as an individual is disappointed that Putin continues bombing Ukraine. Well, he promised me not to do that. Politics cannot just be between two leaders.
Yeah.
It must be built on principles, values, ideas. And when they try to privatize politics into my personal opinion right now, that is very fragile. And that's very challenging and also very dangerous, I would like to say. So our democracies are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's why we in Sweden, we are reaching out every single day to South Africa. We supported your struggle for democracy. We need your support now in our struggle for democracy, because our democracies are challenged by authoritarian regimes all over the world. There are so many troll factories that are doing whatever they can to destabilize my country, Sweden, today. And we know that that's actually done by authoritarian regimes all over the world. So decency, values, and also respectful in your conversation with others. And once again, politics, diplomacy is part of politics, must be built on principles, not just flipping the coin one day and changing it another day, because that will never make any sense.
I'd like you to, help us, educate us, and just help us
No, you don't
understand.
need to be educated. Not by me, anyway.
Yeah, I want to know and take us into your world, as a diplomat on a daily basis. I imagine that the Swedish government back home would not be pronouncing or making statements about a country, a foreign country, without, at the very least, consulting with their representative in that country. So Sweden has an ambassador.
Correct.
You are the ambassador of Sweden to South Africa.
Yeah.
I would imagine it would be quite taken aback if if the government there started making certain pronouncements,
Of course.
that without consulting you. So how would it be then? It's very strange to understand that a country like the US, which has had representation in South Africa for many, many years, I cannot imagine that there's a country who would have more intelligence on any country not just South Africa, in most countries, than the US, So it seems to me that what is happening is deliberate. But what I can't, for the life of me, put my finger on is why.
Well,
what is the end game?
I think I have an answer to that question. So much is a theater for domestic purpose. To gain support in your own country. Not to establish good relation with others.
With the rest of the world.
That's not interesting. You can act in my country or in Germany or in whatever country in a way that either you are very concerned that you have good relation with other countries, or you're just focusing on promoting domestic opinion, the one that actually paid your candidacy as a president or prime minister or whatever, pay back to them maybe. So my guess now is that this talk about the genocide on white farmers is to support the thoughts and ideas of extreme right conservatives in US, telling them, I'm your president. That's my guess.
Yeah. Which
makes I'm
makes
so brave.
sense.
I can say this into the face of the South African president. See how brave I am. I'm your president. I think this is for domestic use, not to establish serious relation with other countries.
Yes, it doesn't actually matter.
It doesn't
because
matter.
I mean,
It's
there's
not
one
true,
thing.
it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, the United States has always been, accused of being insular, parochial, and all of that. And now Donald Trump actually has tapped into that very effectively.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But we are depending on each other.
Well, this is the thing.
We are depending on each other. Europe is depending on African continent. And African continent is depending on Europe. Europe is depending on US on African continent, Asia. We are depending on each other. And we are depending on that we can do trade with each other. And we are depending on each other in the fight for democracy. Because democracy is right now, when we have this conversation, you and I, losing the battle. Democracy is, authoritarian regimes are on the rise all over the world, authoritarian leaders. And we need to unite and support each other in the battle to support democracy. So that's why I also think that we should analyze what's happening in United States, in Europe, in Russia, in Iran, in China, and other parts of the world. Okay, what are the trends? Where are they heading? We know history, but where will we be 5 or 10 years to come? That's the most important. And where do we want to be 5 to 10 years to come? Together with who? Together with who will we work closely with 5 to 10 years to come? That's the answer everyone must give now.
I mean, when all of this is done, I mean, surely there will be a price to pay for the madness that we are seeing now, because this has upended long-standing relationships, long-standing alliances, basically on the brink of collapse. I mean, one wonders whether there will be a NATO by the end of this 4 years of Donald Trump. How do you then, how does the international community deal with a president who is actually all about, as the young people like to say, he's all about vibes, or vibes, as we say. So he's not someone, he's got a casual relationship with facts and the truth. So it's useless to try and speak sense and truth to him.
I think everyone should follow in the footsteps of the South African government and President Ramaphosa and his team to involve US in conversations, talks on a daily basis. To isolate US now would be extremely dangerous.
Absolutely.
So now we need to do exactly what the president did last week. And we must continue to do that. We need to continue strengthen collaboration when it comes to universities, research, science, politics, trade, sport, culture, or whatever. Now is the time when we need to do more together. Otherwise, we will be downhill in the relations globally.
I'm interested in when you say that to isolate the United States would be extremely dangerous. Please expand on that and explain why you say that it would be dangerous. Well, dangerous in what sense?
I mean, it's the strongest economy in the world. It's the largest military power. and they are 300 plus million citizens. Of course, a country of that size must be involved in global issues, must be part in global decision making, cannot be just out of the room, not be thrown out of the room and not walk out of the room. They must be at the table, because when we are challenging questions like climate change, digitalization, fight against authoritarian regimes, or whatever it is, we need US at the table. Because to the end, he was elected by the voters of US. He didn't steal the election. He was elected. So that this is a democracy that have elected a leader. Of course, we must engage with that democracy. There is no alternative to that.
Yeah. Geopolitics are in a very interesting space now, because we were talking about the other, the big issue that is having to be, there's two main. There's so many things that are happening in the world, but let me focus more about on what's happening with Russia, for example. And you spoke about how Donald Trump seems to think everything can just be solved by being good buddies with the presidents of other countries. It seems to me that this Donald Trump must be a godsend to Vladimir Putin, because he's just a perfect person for Vladimir Putin, because he is repeating Putin's lies and that sort of thing. And whatever pressure has been placed on Russia up to now, it seems to me has now been lifted thanks to Donald Trump. And it has placed the rest of Europe in a very tricky situation. How are the current events that are unfolding around Ukraine and Russia, and now with the US's change of posture, do you expect this to have a lasting impact? Well, already I think we are seeing a lasting impact in the form of the commitment that Europe has made to its own defense. But what are the longer term impacts of what's currently unfolding?
Start by US of today. I'm very convinced that in US Congress, there is a strong support for democracy and support to Ukraine. I'm absolutely convinced about that. If Trump is playing a game, or if he has some sort of tactic, I can't analyze that. But the support for Ukraine among US decision makers is very, very strong. And also, I need to reflect on this. When I was 13 years old, I was standing up to my knees in snow, raising money to the liberation movement of South Africa. And Sweden was one of the countries that actually supported the most we can. And every single day, more or less, I've been told that, we must be loyal to Russia because they supported us too. But they never supported the idea of democracy.
Yeah.
And that's my point. We were there supporting your right to become a democratic state. One man, one vote. But that was not the support given by Russia, because there is no democracy in that country. They gave you arms, of course, so that you could run the country and be loyal to Moscow. But they never was an ally in the fight for democracy. And they are not today either. Ukraine is a democracy in Europe and is a sovereign, independent country invaded, violated by the neighbor Russia. And we can't be neutral on that, because if you're neutral between authoritarianism and democracy, I think that's a very difficult stand to take, actually. Democracy today is very, very vulnerable, and we need everyone. The progressive South African constitution, we need that in Europe. We need it in my country. You are so far ahead of us with your constitution from 1995, 96. I talked to Albert Sachs so many times, and he was in Stockholm, my capital of Sweden, and studied constitutions paid by our developing agency to write the constitution. I met with him in February this year, quite recently, and we talked about that the principles of democracy is what combines us, and we will never ever fail to defend those principles. That's why the war between Russia and Ukraine is not just a war between two countries. It's a war between democracy and dictatorship. authoritarianism. And that's why Ukraine must win this war. And that's why Russia must lose this war. Otherwise, it will continue to other countries.
It won't stop with Ukraine.
So this is, we will be there until there is a victory for Ukrainian people and peace is there. We will never turn our back on them. And I don't think any European country will do that either. So this is a fight for democracy, and they are up to 5,000 people dying every single day in this war now, just because Putin wants to conquer a neighboring country. That's not acceptable.
But you realize this is a war that would never have happened if Donald Trump was president.
Nothing would happen if Donald Trump was president. I mean, that would be... No, you're right on that.
My guest in studio this evening is the Swedish ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Hakan Juholt. He made up that surname, by the way. He's
my parents.
Oh, not him. Okay, his parents made up, so it's not even a real. It's not a real name.
No, it's not.
You're very. I mean, by the way, what you missed when we were chatting off air is that the ambassador has also gifted me with his book. Tell us a little bit about the book. It's called Herring Diplomacy.
Yes, that's true. Herring is, of course, a fish.
A fish, yes.
Yeah, the pickled herring. And diplomacy is reaching out to establish contact, to get to know each other, find trust. So when there are someone that is really important for me to reach out to in South African government or business or whatever, then the chef at the residence, she will be on leave. Say, bye-bye, this is a too important meeting. And then I make the food myself.
Yeah.
And then I make this traditional Swedish food, we call it the pickled herring. And that has been the food for hundreds of years in my country. That is the most prominent food for us. Easter, Midsummer, Christmas. And I have my grandmother's recipe book. She was born 1911. So when I have that book, and you can imagine how it looks, and I tell that minister of the South African government, we are now eating the herring from the recipe of my grandmother, born 1911. Then a special tie is there. Because if you share the food, and if you share the storytelling behind the food, then you get to know each other. If I invite those ministers and others to fancy restaurants, they don't care about that. They are used to that.
Yes.
But to look into my grandmother's recipe book and eat the food that she prepared in the early 1930s in Sweden and say exactly the same recipe. And then we can talk about history, future, what we're doing together. Because
and this is the food you would have grown up eating.
Correct. So the food that we eat is also the story of who we are.
Absolutely.
And if we should establish contact, me as an ambassador, then you must know more about my story. Otherwise, I'm just a title. But the same moment that you know my story, my parents came up with a name, I did that pickle book, then I give part of me. I mean, I'm investing in you.
Absolutely.
And then you will invest in me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's diplomacy.
Right. Has he tasted your herring? By the way, I'm referring to his colleague.
Sometimes he says that he's allergic to fish. But
is that his way of avoiding eating?
Yeah, but you know he will not be able to run away. So
eventually you'll get him to have it.
Of course I will.
So the traditional Swedish is known as?
It's called a pickled herring, and
pickled herring. Okay,
so and we were the one of the poorest country in the world. Just 120 years ago. So this was a way to preserve the fish, because the fish just came maybe once per year to the coast. And then you were there harvesting the fish. And to keep that fresh 100 years ago, you had to preserve it in those glass jars with ethic and vinegar and salt and so on. So that's an old traditional way to preserve the fish the whole year. And then you spice it whatever you like, with ginger or whatever you like. So
very interesting, yeah. Very good.
So diplomacy is reaching out, show each other respect, and listen more than you talk.
We're talking diplomacy, we're talking herring, talking about food, talking about getting to know each other. I'm getting to know the ambassador of Sweden to South Africa, Hakan Jolt. Let's go to the lines. I've got a couple of callers as well that would like to join our conversation. And you can take it wherever you want. But of course, we're talking about geopolitics, international relations, diplomacy. Let's get your take. Oh, my word, I have to hear from this man. He phones us, Ambassador, I must tell you, he phones about once every 2 years. So every time you see his call, you have to take it.
Oh, of course.
That's the food.
Evening to you, Titi, and your guests. How are you guys?
We're very well. Welcome on your your bi-yearly call.
You know, Titi, the ambassador is forced to take a tightrope, to walk a tightrope in terms of Donald Trump. To ask him, because the Nordic states, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, they've always maintained neutrality and a cool head in terms of geopolitics. But now you deal with somebody who always wants to transact, wants to get something out of you before you can engage, before he can start to talk sense to you. And I think there's no turning back from this. We can continue to engage Donald Trump and the U.S. by extension. And we are in trouble, Titi, because that man has got the PIN code to the nuclear code. And we are in trouble. But finally, I would like to ask the ambassador about South Africa. We've regressed. It's what when they assisted us, what they bargained for, because the economic reality hasn't dawned to those who were denied economic rights and other things that will empower and affirm the previously oppressed. Good evening to you, Titi. I'm getting back to my form. I'm getting back to my feet. Maybe we'll engage.
Oh, wonderful. It's good
evening
to hear.
Evening to you.
Thank you so much. That is really
Thank you.
good to hear from you after such a long time. I'll get the ambassador to respond to the points that you were raising there. Let me also hear from Rolex in Rustenburg. Rolex.
Good evening and greetings to you and the ambassador and the listeners.
Welcome, sir.
Let me start by saying there are only two black Rolenses in South Africa. That's myself and my ex-girlfriend's son.
Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah, I want to agree there with the ambassador that they are standing for democracy, and some of us have been echoing the sentiment that Donald Trump did not steal the vote. He's there because the American people want him there, and we cannot wish him away. Donald Trump. And secondly, I think also Donald Trump has got us, Mr. Titi, I'm telling you, and the ambassador has just said something very serious there, that they are standing with Ukraine, because Ukraine is the one that is actually feeling the pain right now, whereas our country, our government is standing on the fence, but now they want to take the U.S. they have taken the U.S. to the ICJ, but they are not condemning Russia for the atrocities they are also committing there in Ukraine, which now puts us in a very tight corner, Thank you very much, and I'm enjoying your conversation with the ambassador there.
I appreciate the call. Thank you, Rolex, on the line from Rustenburg. Keep your calls coming on 0861 987 000. So, Sifudi, the first caller there, raised a couple of things. So, the first one he was talking about, he says he feels there's no turning back. You know, that, and I think the question that, if I can paraphrase his question, I think was to the extent that, are we having to change the way in which we do things from a diplomatic point of view in order to accommodate this different animal that is Donald Trump. Or maybe that's exactly what diplomacy is the ability to be able to deal with people like Donald Trump who have no respect, as I said, for rules and convention. That was the first part of his question. Then he was also asking about Sweden and the Nordic countries who have always been supportive of South Africa through the apartheid, the struggle against apartheid, even to the extent of personal cost. They came at a personal cost if you think of the assassination of the former Prime Minister, Olof Palme, and all of that. But so if you want to respond or to pick up on those 2 points.
Brilliant question, both of them. When it comes to interaction, both touched upon Trump. Of course, we must show him respect, treat him with respect, because we expect that from him. So we must behave in the way that we want him to behave in conversation with us. There's an old saying, if they go low, then we go high. And I think that's the only way to do it. Because in the long run, that will win. If we show each other respect, behave decent, and are very focused on our mission, focused on our priorities, focused on our values, then that will win in the long run, both public opinion but also in diplomacy. So that must be the strategy. When it comes to neutrality, well, we are not in any way, any Nordic country, neutral between the oppressor and oppressed. We have never been that. We were not neutral between the people of South Africa that asked for democracy, fought for democracy, and the party regime. So we have never been neutral between oppressed and the oppressor. And the same now when it comes to Ukraine. We know that there is one attacking, and we can't be neutral when one is attacked and one try to defend, to survive. Actually, the Putin plan is to kill Ukraine, to make Ukraine part of Russia. And of course, we can't accept that. Everyone must take a stand. And for me, it's not just defending that country. I don't have so many friends in Ukraine. I'm not doing that for my friends. I'm doing it for the defending of the principle of democracy. The same principles that I defended when the people of South Africa fought for them. So then I was 13 years old, now I'm 62 years old, and I'm still there defending the principles of democracy. And now we need South Africa and other young democracies to help us to defend our democracy because it's threatened. In the same way that you needed us 30, 40 years ago. And the first support from Sweden to the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa came as early as 1960. And 1962, at Labor Day in Sweden, Oliver Tambo was the invited guest speaker. 1962, when the rest of the Western world described ANC and Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela as terrorists. But we were there. We were there in the beginning, and we are there still. So this is a relation in the long run that we work together, built on values. And when it comes to the question of inequality that Sifide also touched upon.
Yes, he was asking whether...
What we try to do there is to work closely on university level. We have a university network with 40 universities, 25 South African and 15 Swedish, that are collaborating on science, research, artificial intelligence, and a lot of other issues. So we try to invest together with South African universities in the future of this lovely country. And education and higher education is important to fight inequality too and poverty.
And then the other caller, Rolex, was asking about South Africa's inconsistent foreign policy. You've kind of answered that one, you've commented on it, to say that you have just made a very profound statement when you say that you are never neutral when it comes to an oppressed and an oppressor or an attacked people and the aggressor. However, so how do you then square that with when you have to have your interactions with the South African government and you see the position they've taken on Ukraine, which again, one mustn't make the mistake of thinking that diplomacy and international relations are a zero-sum game, that things are either black or white. Because South Africa has taken a very strong stance on the Israel-Palestinian situation, but has gone a different direction when it comes to Russia.
When it comes to the Israel-Palestine question issue, Sweden was the first European country that recognized Palestine as an independent sovereign state. We were the first European Union to recognize Palestine. So we are together with the Palestinians too in this. What I do when I meet with officials of the South African government, I explain the Swedish government's view and my personal view. And I can't see any difference in what I did as a teenager supporting your right for democracy, as I'm doing now, 62 years old, supporting Ukrainian people's right for democracy. I can't see any differences. And I explain that. And of course, it's my job to report back to Stockholm the position of the South African government.
My guest in the studio is Ambassador Hakanyold. We're talking geopolitics, we're talking international relations, we're talking diplomacy, we're talking all sorts of other things. So, just now the fact that we've touched on the Israel situation and with Palestine, it is just something that is so depressing. I've gotten to a point where I feel like I don't want to watch international news channels anymore to see the horrors that are being visited on the people of Palestinians while the international community looks on. This is why I have to wonder whether the world, the rules-based order is something that we must forget about. It's just not happening, because we are living in a time where might is right now, So what is to stop, for example, a lot of this has been said about why would China not actually decide, well, we might as well just take Taiwan now, because no one's going to do anything about it. Why doesn't anybody attack anybody else? Because, hey, the world will just look on. Israel is literally starving children to death, and the world doesn't care. I mean, the United Nations, what is the position of the relevance of the United Nations in today's world?
Well, you're so right. You're expressing this so much better than I can do. So there is no reason for me to respond. But just one response is actually that Russia started the war on Ukraine. They invaded Ukraine when they had the presidency of Security Council of United Nations. They were the president of Security Council of United Nations. And during that time, they invaded the neighbor. I mean, that's for me, who have believed in common good and that countries, governments can solve problem in a dialogue, the framework of United Nations, to see that while they're actually having the chairmanship, the presidency, they take the decision to invite that organ that we have created to create peace in this world.
And uphold world peace.
The only instrument, the global instrument for us to keep peace in the world, they are using that instrument, the presidency at that instrument, to start a war. Of course, you're spot on. I know that the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs yesterday called the Israeli ambassador in Stockholm up, and that doesn't happen so very often, and told the ambassador, the Swedish position on the war, the Israeli war on Palestine. So we can't give up, not on our watch, not on your watch, not you as a journalist, not me as an ambassador. We can't do that, because if we give up now, what will happen for our children? What will be for the next generation? And exactly as you say, what will stop China to invade Taiwan? And what will stop another country that feel that they are strong, they have maybe nuclear bombs or whatever, to invade a neighbor, if this global order doesn't function? That's why it's so important that we work together in the European Union. That's why it's so important that the countries such as Africa are committed to the values of democracy and sovereignty, defending that together with all of us. We need to do this. We are in the same boat. And as you said, and I will try to repeat that, just right now we are losing the battle because authoritarian leaders are gaining support and ground, and nationalistic movements are gaining support all over the world. And the one that are reasonable, pragmatic, and want to sit around a table to discuss how we should solve problems, we are right now losing the battle on our watch.
Yeah.
And that can't happen. We will not give up. We will never give up.
Yeah. What you say, I mean, I like that what your, even in your work, that as a diplomat, that basically you are guided by just common decency. And I think if we all operated like that, the world would be so much better, a much better place. But I'm curious about that you genuinely believe in that. Like,
yes.
That you're not one of those who says nice guys come second,
No, nice guys will win the battle. The good will win.
You believe that good always triumphs over evil?
Yes. It must. You saw the fall of the Soviet Empire. You saw the fall of Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich. You have seen empires that are not based on values of democracy, human rights, dignity, respect to human beings, your neighbors. All those empires, sooner or later, will fall. So we need.
However, if you speak to the MAGA world, people in the hashtag MAGA world, they will tell you that Donald Trump's ascendancy for a second term was triumph over good of evil over those woke international leftists and whatnot.
No, and of course it's very individual what is good or evil. So, for example, at our embassy we have a very good team on SRHR, sexual rights and health, and to support gay rights, to support young girls that actually are pregnant, midwives, to support any civil society working on gender-based violence. But for some, that is bad. Some people say, well, gay rights is bad.
Yes.
We say, of course, gay rights are good because we are all equals and we are all loved and we all have the right to be loved. So it's up to each and one of us to determine what is bad or good. Good, of course. But principles as human rights, democracy can never be bad. Yeah. So let's unite on those.
Let me off ramp a little bit. By the way,
yes,
I have learned that you were a photographer. I'm looking at those. I'm looking at the recipes here. I gather you're a photographer, a trained photographer. Yep. Did you take these pictures in the book?
Yeah, most of them.
Amazing pictures. Very good. Wow, you can tell this is a professional photographer.
I worked as a journalist for 12 years before I went into Parliament. So I served 24 years in Swedish Parliament, but before that, 12 years as a journalist and photographer.
Wow.
At the newspaper.
Wow. Now, how is this for either serendipity or coincidence? Just last week, and I don't know whether you are familiar with it, I would imagine you are, we had in studio the nephew of a photographer, a South African photographer called Ernest Cole.
Yeah, of course I have the book.
Of course you...
I have one of the books. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I love the book.
So we spoke at length about his battles to now... basically, he has now become the official archivist of for his uncle's work, we were talking about the battles that he's had to go. So he recently embarked on a trip to Sweden,
and then I must say that that's one of the official gifts from at our embassy. That book, the grey one, that's one of the official gifts that we give to guests. Guests. Yeah. So, and he's on his way to Sweden.
No, he's actually been to Sweden already. He recently went, where he went to basically claim or reclaim a vault, a safety deposit box that was in a vault in a Swedish bank, containing some 6,000, 6,000 or is it 60,000? 60,000 negatives, photo negatives.
Wow.
Right. So, while this was quite a long battle that he had to fight to get it, because they were expecting him to prove his bona fides, to say that they are the family, that they are entitled to that. It's a battle that continues. So I took it upon myself to say, listen, we called him earlier to say, listen, we have the ambassador coming in here.
Of course.
And he said, I suppose this question to you, says, are you in a position to convince the Moderna Museum in Stockholm to return the vintage prints of Ernest Cole to his estate in South Africa if they cannot prove ownership of the prints or produce a deed of donation from Ernest Cole himself. This is now the man's life's work.
I know there's a Swedish journalist living in Cape Town, Torbjörn Salander, who's actually on this story, and it's been in Swedish papers a lot on that story. I don't think I'm in that position. I can't, because the ownership of negatives, it's really difficult, and probably that will be sorted out in court. But I'm really hoping that the outcome will be a collaboration. A collaboration between him and the and the museum. The Modern Museum is a lovely museum in Stockholm. I visit that as much as I can, and it makes sense that they can work this out together, because it's a common interest, of course, to show the photos to the rest of the world, and the museum and him together. So my recommendation is that this must be sorted out in collaboration. But I can't say that I'm in a position to determine what the museum should do or not to do. But I'm hoping with all of my heart that they listen.
Is this a private museum?
No, it's a state
museum. Yeah.
But I hope that they listen to my advice to sort this out, so both can benefit from those photos. That would be the best.
Okay.
That was quite diplomatic.
Yeah.
that was proof of diplomatic skills.
No, that was diplomacy 101. Fantastically, you handled that beautifully. Now, as we approach the end of our conversation, I would like to just get a sense from you of what your By the way, how much longer
I've been here for 5 years now, so I will not stay so much longer. So my term end this year.
Yes.
So I have 5 years to get to know South Africa and the people of South Africa.
Right. Now, what is your sense of what you would like to see for your hopes for South Africa, firstly, and for Sweden, South Africa-Swedish relations, and for the world that we live in, the fragile world that we live in.
But first of all possibilities are here in South Africa. South Africa could become the most wealthy country in the world. You have all the resources, you have the critical minerals, you have the youth, you have the skilled people, you have the creativity, you have everything here. You have plus that you have the nature and tourist locations or whatever. In Sweden we have more or less nothing. We have snow.
And fish, herring.
And we are one of the most innovative countries in the world.
Yes.
Over the last 20 years, we have been among the 3 most innovative countries in the world because we are working together. We are not trying to hurt each other. We try to collaborate instead. So, I mean, it's 20 years, one of the 3 most innovative countries in the world, up in the north, with snow 6 months per year, with all this innovation from Spotify to Bluetooth or to whatever is Swedish, the zipper, the seatbelt in the car, the dynamite, the Celsius scale or whatever is Swedish. The Volvo, the Scania, and so on. So what I hope for this beautiful country, all the possibilities are here. You can be the most prosperous country in the world, but you need to collaborate more. You need to tear down silos. You need to work between silos instead of closed silos like this. So, for example, our business community works very closely with universities and policymakers, and that's something that we try to implement too, so that we are at universities are training our young generation to the job that will come. We want to be first into the new, never last out of the old. So that is the message.
I love that. Say that again.
No, Sweden, our mission is to be first into the new, not last out of the old.
Wonderful.
And that is the idea that we have with the university network, so that our students, the young generation, are trained for the job that will come, not the job that was 10 years ago. So that is also a method of being in front. Now we are a global front runner on artificial intelligence. We don't want to be last into that. We want to be first into that. So we try to establish that kind of relation with different agencies in South Africa. And we have so much to learn from South Africa. All the skills here, all the brilliance here. So I want us to do more together, to see each other, respect each other, learn from each other, and join hands defending democracy and human rights globally.
And never, ever lose faith in mankind.
Never lose faith, never give up. Failure is not an option.
Beautifully said. And a perfect way on which to end our conversation. Ambassador, thank you so much for visiting us and spending time with us. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you and hearing your ideas. You've lifted me up. I was becoming extremely cynical as a human being and losing faith in humanity.
No.
But yeah.
And thank you.
I'm a believer as well that good always triumphs over evil.
And thank you for having me, and thanks to all your listeners, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much.